Hey, what's up guys? Just a quick heads up before we jump into the video. If you are trying to avoid Battle for Azeroth spoilers, please stop the video now. There will be spoilers in this video. You have been warned. So, I spend quite a bit of time on our WoW and on the World of Warcraft forums. And with recent revelations of the Horde leadership's actions in Battle for Azeroth, I began to notice a lot of people being dissatisfied with the story's direction. Many players who follow WoW lore have expressed frustration with the Horde's inability to be somewhat neutral or morally justified in their actions. Which is fair. The Horde has made mistakes and questionable decisions. But among my browsing of the many lore discussions going on right now about Battle for Azeroth, I found one very intriguing post, one I'd like to share and analyze with you guys. Now, for the most part, I would say I have an alliance bias, or at least had one. For a long time, I saw the Horde leadership as an unstable and sloppy governance, and I think that has a lot to do with Blizzard's writing and how they present the story more than anything, which I will get into a little more at the end of the video. With Battle for Azeroth in particular, though, I was really questioning Blizzard's storytelling decisions involving the factions going forward. But this comment, posted on the World of Warcraft subreddit by user We Can Have All Three, in response to someone expressing their frustration with the direction the Horde was taking, had quite an impact on convincing me otherwise. Let's take a look. The reason the factions are together now isn't the same as it was in the days of vanilla. It's not a fight over contested borders or resources or philosophy anymore. Sure, that stuff is there, but we're not the itinerant adventurers finding Mankrick's wife anymore either. The war has become a political one, and we are political actors. So, from the end of Warcraft 3 onto vanilla, the Horde had assembled its allies, began gaining territory, and for the most part wasn't in direct conflict with the Alliance. With the Burning Crusade, the Horde and the Alliance were hostile, sure, but they weren't intently fighting each other. They were just getting in each other's way. In Wrath of the Lich King, we see the Horde and Alliance working together to take down the Scourge. Even after the events of Wrathgate, the Horde and Alliance were on stable terms, even as rivals. It wasn't until Cataclysm that things really started changing between the two factions. With the world broken, resources were becoming scarce for the Horde capital in Durotar. Garrosh was the newly appointed war chief, and he sought not only to replenish the Horde back to its pre-Cataclysm state, but to invigorate it with a newly built capital city. And he wasn't going to find the resources required to do so without encroaching on contested territory. As a result, tensions built, especially when the druids of the Cenarian Circle were killed in the conflict by the Horde. The then neutral goblins of Kazan were also caught up in the bloodshed by the Alliance, leading them to become an ally for the Horde. And of course, the secluded neutral nation of Gilneas was invaded by the Horde, making the Gilneans allies of the Alliance once again. The races of the factions were now bound together by politics more so than anything else because of the conflict. The Horde and the Alliance were now at full-out war. When the Cataclysm hit, it hit the Horde the hardest. Whether or not Garrosh was right in his actions during this time is up to you, but one thing remains true. If Garrosh had not done what he did in Ashenvale, the state of Durotar, Orgrimmar, and of the Horde as a direct result would have been bleak. This is why the events of Cataclysm are particularly important in my opinion, because it began the tense faction rivalry narrative we see in BFA. The Horde's power relative to the Alliance began looking very different ever since Cataclysm. And this is where I think people are getting confused as to why the Horde is so aggressive. The Horde and Alliance are almost always seen as equal power in-game, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. As we moved into Mists of Pandaria, the power structure in the Horde fell flat on its face. A civil war within the Horde began, in the middle of a continental invasion, whilst at war with the Alliance. The Horde was at a breaking point. When we sailed off to fight the Legion, we did it with a force of generally Alliance heroes. Velen was at the front of the charge, along with Turalyon and Alaria. Illidan was there too, and while he might be chaotic neutral, he is still a Night Elf. Canonically, the siege of Orgrimmar got broken by Alliance forces, and they had the Horde at sword point to dictate their terms relating to Garrosh. Here's what Anduin does not understand. We've been fighting for a long time. Not out and out, but the Alliance and Horde have been grappling over everything they can. Quite recently, the Alliance literally put their boot on the Horde's neck at Orgrimmar. The Exodar is, in terms, in the hands of Alliance forces. The Army of Light is championed by Alliance heroes. The Alliance has an incredible amount of power and momentum. Anduin might think he's being reasonable, but everything he's doing comes from this position of incredible power. When Magni turns up to tell Sylvanas to lay off the Azerite, it's a directive coming from an Alliance ruler. We know how powerful Azerite is, how destructive it is. The Alliance is so big, so powerful, and the Horde has traditionally had not so great relationships with it. Are those bad relationships justified? Sure, Garrosh existed, but they inform the state of affairs today. Give up your claim to the Azerite, and the Horde essentially become vassals to the Alliance with no way of defending themselves if, say, Greymane decides to take revenge, or Jaina, or any other very pro-war leaders. The only way to remain independent and safe is to obtain weapons of our own. Lore-wise, it goes without question. The Alliance is simply more powerful. Anduin might have good intentions, but he is young. Perhaps even call him naive. He's surrounded by leaders who would rather see the Horde disciplined and powerless more so than an independent faction. With the introduction to Azerite, we see a disparity for control. If war breaks loose, the faction that wields more Azerite is the faction that wins. Sylvanas, I believe, is a very dangerous leader. She is the epitome of lawful evil in the Warcraft lore. She has done some very questionable things, especially recently. But everything she willingly does, be it with malintent or not, is reasonably justified. She is smart and she knows how to lead. Let us not forget that the Loa themselves appointed her to lead, and with good reason. This faction war is a game of chess. Balance of power must be maintained. We fight for the Horde for the same reasons we've always fought for the Horde, since Warcraft 3. For self-determination, independence, and freedom from oppression. Sylvanas was Ranger General for a long time. She's an astute military commander and tactician. She sees things through a military lens, and she is right about this. Anduin's not a fool, but he is naive, inexperienced, and is often taken advantage of. Would he pull Greymane's leash? How about talk down Tyrande? We can't afford the luxury of patience. The Legion is gone, but N'Zoth is still around. The Twilight Hammer, Queen Azshara. We have to be ready to defend ourselves. This isn't the little vanilla world where your biggest problem was some Fire Lord in Blackrock Mountain. The world is at stake. We cannot afford to be negligent. We cannot afford weakness. Anduin's initiatives are commendable, but we cannot rely on the fickle, rightly self-interested leadership of the Alliance. We have to make our own way, as ever, for the Horde. I have to say, We Can Have All Three truly wrote this with passion and a great deal of reason. Like I said before, I was sided with the Alliance coming into BFA. I thought the Horde was insane for doing the things that are being revealed for BFA. Perhaps even corrupted. But this post has changed my perspective quite a bit. I think distribution of power is a very interesting topic, but I don't see the narrative being discussed a lot when talking about WoW lore, especially right now in BFA. I think the reason the narrative isn't very commonly discussed, like I said earlier, is because Blizzard hasn't been delivering the story very well with the past few expansions when talking about the factions. And it almost seems like Blizzard didn't intend for this to be the narrative in the first place, so I guess we'll see what happens. But Now that I look back at Cataclysm, and with BFA coming up and all the new revelations, I do see a narrative, and I really hope this is the narrative Blizzard is going to take on. We know very well that Dalen Proudmoore was a furious advocate of unreasonably bringing down the Horde. And here we are, at the cusp of the Colterians rejoining the Alliance. Sylvanas is a necessary leadership, not a desirable one. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing right now. I think Sylvanas is a character with a lot of bad intentions, but keep in mind, Sylvanas is not another Garrosh. She isn't mindlessly attacking her enemies and her rivals. She agreed to meet with Anduin and Arthai, and she kept her word. Yes, she killed her own people, but Anduin knowingly brought a usurper to that meeting, which was a betrayal to the agreement. She met with her sisters, two very significant Alliance characters. She had the intent of killing them, sure, but she showed emotion and remorse. Sylvanas is not the monster people have been painting her to be. The main idea here is that there should be somewhat equal power between the two factions. But right now, the Alliance is an established and powerful faction, whereas the Horde is a more independent and free adversarial faction that has fallen behind in power. Anduin is arguably not a suitable leader to deal with the ever more threatening enemies that are thrown at us. Sylvanas is not the leader the Horde wanted, but the leader they needed. Either way, I think Blizzard is crossing a very thin rope here, and I think they can easily mess this up. But if they're going to push the narrative that I think they're going to push, then I'm excited for the Horde's future, and the Alliances as well. And I hope I did a good job, along with We Can Have All Three from Reddit, of convincing you guys. Alright guys, that's all I have for this video. I am just starting out making some WoW and gaming related videos. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like, and if you're interested in seeing more content like this, make sure to subscribe. I will see y'all in the next video. Bye bye.